Hi, this is Alex, a very tired Alex, as you can see by the bags under my eyes and the wrinkles in my forehead, but that's unrelated. And I'm standing inside this spiraling helical sculpture. And this is Anxiety Part 2, the spiral of anxiety, see what I did there, and where the exit is. So, anxiety is your body and mind's automatic response to a situation which they perceive to be a threat. And they produce what's called the fight or flight response, which is basically preparing your body to either take on a threat or to run away from it. And this is manifested by physical symptoms such as a racing heart, maybe heavy perspiration, quick, shallow breathing, that kind of thing. Now, this response is normally triggered in situations which are a serious threat to your survival, or is supposed to be. But for people with an anxiety disorder, like me, this feeling is triggered in situations which aren't a serious threat, but which for some reason our body thinks are. And it's often a situation which most regular people would experience some degree of anxiety in, but which for the person with disorder, it kind of ramps up and goes out of control to the point where, you know, it completely overtakes you and you feel like you're never going to be able to do the task at hand. So, for example, this could be something like public speaking. For most people would experience some degree of nerves when they do public speaking, but they can still do it when called upon. But for the person with the disorder, that situation might be so terrifying that they physically couldn't do it. Now, you might be asking, well, what causes the anxiety kind of ramp up to this extreme level? And what happens is there's a vicious cycle of anxiety which causes your kind of feelings to spiral out of control. So what happens is you enter a situation which your body and mind perceive to be a threat. And what happens is you start scanning for threats and your attention narrows. So you start to focus on yourself, how you're feeling. Those physical symptoms begin. So your sort of quick heart rate, maybe a bit of trembling, a bit of sweating, that kind of thing. And what happens is your natural instinct is to escape from the situation, right? You don't want to feel that way, so you want to get out of it. So you either avoid the situation, so just cut it out entirely, or you engage in what are called safety behaviours, which are a type of avoidance. And what those are might be things like, for example, for me, a safety behaviour would be laughing too much in a social situation because I'm feeling discomfort. Or what's the other one I was thinking of? So like avoiding talking to people if you go to a party. You're engaging in the activity, but you're engaging in a safety behaviour which kind of blunts your anxiety. So you engage in the avoidance, and what happens is the next time you encounter that situation or a similar situation, the physical symptoms actually get worse and they're kind of ramping up. So this causes your anxiety to worsen and your confidence that you can cope in the situation to go down. So again, you engage in the avoidance or the safety behaviours, and the cycle repeats, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and the anxiety increases in the long term. So obviously avoidance doesn't help with anxiety, so what else can you do? As you might have guessed, you have to confront it. Now, there are two aspects of anxiety to confront. There's the cognitive aspect, how your mind thinks about the situation, and two, the bodily aspect, which is how your body reacts to the situation. So the cognitive aspect challenges how you think about a situation in your conscious thought processes. So for the example of public speaking, some automatic thoughts which run through your mind might be things like, people will find me boring, they'll see me doing this and think I'm bad at it, they won't pay attention to what I'm saying, they'll laugh or make fun of me, that kind of thing. And these thoughts might also be linked with how you think your body will react in the situation. So there might be things like, people will see me trembling and shaking, they will see me sweating, think I'm disgusting, or I'll choke, won't be able to speak properly. In CBT, you challenge these thoughts by doing what's called a behavioural experiment. So I'm going to take you through this step by step. So firstly, you identify a negative automatic thought that you have about a situation. So for public speaking, let's take, people will find me boring. And you rate this thought with a percentage according to how strongly you believe it. So personally, at one time, I would have rated this thought at about 90%. Next, you make some predictions about what you think would happen in the situation to make the idea behind the thought apparent. So for people finding me boring, it might be people yawning, glazing over with their expressions, or looking at their phones, that kind of thing. So now you design an experiment to test those predictions. Now for public speaking, there's an obvious experiment: do some public speaking. How would you do this? Well, there may be an opportunity at work, or you could try going to a public speaking club. What I did was to ask to speak at a support group, and this was a really good way to start because it was a small group of people in a supportive environment, and it just so happened that at the time they were meeting to talk about anxiety, so my behavioural experiment fitted in quite nicely. Now, a really good way to get feedback is to ask people to fill in feedback forms. Now, this might seem a bit weird, but people will usually be willing to do this, and not only will this give you excellent feedback about the situation, but it will give you a written record that you can refer to in the future. So once you've planned the experiment, then comes the biggest step: actually doing the experiment and following through without any safety behaviours. Now, it helped me to think about these experiments as it's just an experiment, just see what happens. Treat it like a video game if you can, where you're just trying things out and you're not bothered about the outcome. So after the experiment's done, think about what happened. Look at your feedback forms. Were people really yawning and glazing over? What did they think about your talk and about you? Now, it seems like no matter how many times I do a behavioural experiment, I'm always surprised by how positive the feedback actually is. And I bet it'll be the same for you, so please go out and try one. So you've done your experiment, you've got your feedback. Now what you want to do is rate those initial predictions and thoughts with a percentage again, according to how strongly you believe them now. And then compare these with your starting percentages. They've probably gone down quite a lot. So what this is doing is it's providing your mind with positive information which conflicts with those negative automatic thoughts and pre-existing beliefs that you have. And it's kind of changing how you might think about a situation. One important thing I want to mention about behavioural experiments is that you should always plan them and keep a written record. So this gives you kind of something to refer to in the future, and it also helps you to structure them to help you make better progress. The bodily aspect challenges how your body responds physiologically to that situation. So like I spoke about before, the fight or flight response kicks in when there's a perceived threat, and it induces those physical symptoms, the racing heart, the heavy perspiration and the shaking. But what happens is when you face a situation that makes you anxious without using any safety behaviours, obviously your anxiety kicks in and starts to go up. It keeps going up, but eventually, if you hold out for long enough, it will peak and then it will start to go down. Now you might think that you could jump in at the deep end and face your biggest fear and get it over and done with. But this technique, which is called flooding, usually only works temporarily. So what happens is, typically there's quite a long period of time between your first exposure and your second exposure. So by the time you come to face that situation again, all your body remembers is that peak feeling of anxiety you felt the first time you did it. So you're kind of back to square one. In CBT, you do what's called graded exposure, which is where you face a small, easy to handle situation, and then you work your way up through more and more challenging ones. So by doing this in a controlled and a repeated way, you can start to reduce your anxiety long term. So what you do is, firstly, you take that small, easy to handle situation and face that without using any safety behaviours, and your anxiety naturally kicks in, but then it peaks and goes down, and that causes a widening of your perception. So those physical symptoms decrease and you start to focus on things which are external to you. So instead of focusing on yourself and how you're feeling, focus on things around you. And because those physical symptoms decrease, that causes your confidence that you can cope and control your responses to go up. And so that gives you the confidence to do another behavioural experiment, enter another situation that's slightly harder, and you build on that from there, and the cycle repeats. So what you're doing is you're effectively training your body out of the fight or flight response to a particular situation. And you're taking that vicious circle of anxiety where you're spiraling down and you're getting worse, and you're transforming it, turning it around into a virtuous cycle of confidence where you're spiraling upwards and you're getting better. So now I've described how to do behavioural experiments, how to challenge both the cognitive and the bodily aspects of your anxiety. I want you to think of a series of experiments that you can do to challenge yourself in a situation that makes you anxious. And believe me, there are opportunities everywhere. Could be anything like speaking to a stranger about anything, recording a video of yourself in public, like I'm doing. But believe me, the opportunities are everywhere. When I spoke in the beginning of the video about where the exit to the spiral of anxiety is, I hope you can see now that those opportunities, those exits, are in effect actually everywhere. They're all around you. You just have to walk through one.